Hey there, my name's Quinn and I'm the Habitat Restoration Coordinator for the American Littoral Society's Delaware Bayshore office. So if you're scrolling past this event and you're not familiar with the Littoral Society, we are a coastal conservation nonprofit that's been around since 1961. I work out of our Millville office and have been doing restoration on the Delaware Bay for the last 6 years. So we also focus on education, conservation, and advocacy for the coast. So I'm here on Reed's Beach in Cape May County, New Jersey. This is one of the beaches that we restored in order to protect horseshoe crabs. So May is a really special time here in the Delaware Bay. Horseshoe crabs come up from the continental shelf to lay eggs. And then we also have endangered shorebirds, including the red horseshoe crab eggs, where they will continue their journey up to the Arctic to breed. So in May, we actually closed the now for shorebirds to feed on these horseshoe crab eggs without being disturbed. So on Reed's Beach, there are some birds, but they're down at the very far end where there's a really nice shoal for them to feed on. So I'm nowhere near the birds, so I don't have to worry about disturbing them too much. So I have here, let me flip this around. So I have 2 horseshoe crabs ready to go. So we're gonna get a close-up look at these. So this is the American horseshoe crab. Limulus polyphemus is the scientific name. So there are 4 species of horseshoe crabs in the world. This is the only one that we see here in the United States. The Atlantic horseshoe crab. The other 3 species, they can be found in Asia. So this is a female horseshoe crab here, and then I also have a male horseshoe crab. So there's a couple of ways to tell the difference between the two. The very first appendage here looks like a boxing mitt or a glove or a little claw, and the males actually use that to clasp onto the very backs of the females here. So the females are also a good bit larger than the males. That's another way to tell the difference between male and female horseshoe crabs. The females are larger, sorry. And then also the very front part here, this is called the prosoma, this front part. The front part here is curved much more on the males than the females. So the very front of her prosoma is relatively flat. So I'm gonna flip the horseshoe crab over, and we're gonna take a look at the top of the horseshoe crab and go over some anatomy here. So this very front part, this is the prosoma, this is the epithesoma, and then this is the tail or telson here. So on the prosoma, we have the eyes. Horseshoe crabs actually have 10 eyes. So there's one set here. These are compound eyes. So they can, tell the difference between night and day with those. We have another set of eyes here in the front. Kind of looks like a nose, but it's another set of eyes. These are called the median eyes. And that helps them determine night and day as well. And then there's another set of eyes right behind the compound eyes, which are really hard to see, almost impossible to see. And those are lateral eyes. They have one behind each of the compound eyes. And then there's also some eyes underneath the prosoma, and then photoreceptors along the telson as well. So the prosoma is completely hollow inside, and that is where the female stores all of her eggs. That's where their nervous system is. That's where their heart is. So there's actually a ridge that runs down the length of the prosoma here, and their heart is underneath of that. So on the epithesoma, usually you'll find some hitchhikers on the prosoma, or the epithesoma, sorry. So you have some barnacles here. There's a little limpet there, and there's some brown algae. So all of that is not harmful to horseshoe crabs. Horseshoe crabs are really slow moving individuals. and their hard shell is a great habitat for some of these other creatures, like the barnacles, that need a hard surface to live on. Then we have the tail or telson. So a really common misconception about horseshoe crabs is that they can sting or that they're venomous. So their tail can't sting you. It doesn't really hurt you at all. They actually use their tail to flip over. So I'm going to pan over to the male horseshoe crab I have here. So the male horseshoe crab is upside down, and he can use his tail or telson to stick down into the sand and flip himself back over. So if any part of their tail is missing, they're not going to be able to flip back over. So if you are picking up horseshoe crabs, you never want to pick them up by the tail. You can grab them by the front and flip them over. So we're going to take a look at the underside of the horseshoe crab now. So we talked about the modified pedipalp for the male, right? So that's how we know this is a male, by the little boxing glove that's here. There's another set of appendages here. They're little feeding appendages called the chelicerae. So horseshoe crabs, they live on the bottom of the bay floor. So they eat things that you'll find on the bottom of the bay floor, like little clams and worms. So they take their chelicerae and they put the food into their mouth, which can be found in the very center there. So where the legs meet in the middle, that's actually their mouth. It's filled with bristles and sand. So the chelicerae, they'll put the little clams and mussels and worms into the middle of the mouth there. And then they'll do like a little jig and grind up all that food and digest it. So they do have sets of legs. So these are the ambulatory legs, or just walking legs. And then they have a set on the very back here called the pusher legs. And so these legs, the females will use them to lay her eggs. So horseshoe crabs, they'll come up every high tide during the day and at night, and the female will bury herself down into the sand using those pusher legs, and then she will deposit her eggs and then form them into golf-sized clusters, about 4,000 at a time, and she'll form those clusters with these pusher legs here. And then they also use those to walk, so I can flip him over, maybe he'll start walking, and we can see the pusher legs in action. So if you can see, the pusher leg is coming out from behind. So this part is called the fin. You can see the pusher leg coming out the bottom there, helping him to walk. So if I turn the horseshoe crab over, right, it'll start curling up on itself, and that's actually like a protection thing. So the way horseshoe crab breathes are through book gills, which are now covered in sand and not cooperating. But let's see, open her back up a little bit. There we go. Yeah, so the book gills here, which are a little hard to see because they're covered in sand, that's actually how the horseshoe crab breathes. So horseshoe crabs can stay out of water for a period of time as long as those book gills stay damp. So what she's trying to do right now is to cover up her book gills. There's a flap right before the book gills start that's called the operculum. And so underneath the operculum, that's where she will deposit her eggs. But the operculum also serves as a protective barrier for those gills so they don't dry up quite as quickly. So it's a pretty cloudy day here at Reed's Beach, but you know, as we get further into May and then into June, it gets really hot out here in the sun. So those gills will start to dry out fairly quick, and then gulls can also start to predate on them as well. So she's trying to protect herself right now by closing up. So horseshoe crabs are not only important for the shorebirds that are here on the Delaware Bay right now, but they're also really important for humans. So horseshoe crabs have a pretty cool component to their blood. So their blood is blue. Their blood is actually copper-based, unlike our blood, which is iron-based, which makes it red. So their blood is copper-based, and it actually clots or coagulates anytime it comes in contact with bacteria. So in the 1960s, a scientist discovered this clotting component to their blood and developed limulus amoebocyte lysate, or LAL. And they actually use this test in the biomedical industry to test any biomedical device that's going to be used on humans, whether vaccines or pacemakers, hip replacements, any kind of intravenous drugs. So their blood clots or anytime it comes in contact with bacteria or endotoxins. So in order to make sure that these biomedical devices are safe for us to use, they first test them using horseshoe crab blood. So there we go. Turn them back around a little. So there are some threats that horseshoe crabs face, and so one of them is habitat loss. So here on the Delaware Bay, we lost a good bit of habitat for spawning horseshoe crabs right after Hurricane Sandy. The storms came through and wiped away a good bit of the beaches here, which we were able to restore in time for the spawning the following season, and we have been doing that ever since Hurricane Sandy. So habitat loss, and then they are also fished and used for bait for whelk and eel. So that's actually illegal here in New Jersey. The Littoral Society, along with other conservation groups, helped pass a moratorium back in 2008, where you can no longer harvest horseshoe crabs for bait. So you can do this in other parts of the United States, including the Delaware side of the bay. And then also some human disturbance too is another threat that they face. So to help study the horseshoe crabs, the Littoral Society has been counting horseshoe crabs on our restored beaches and tagging them as well. And it just gives us a better idea of the horseshoe crab population and how it's doing, and then where they're going as well. So what we're learning from our tag data is that horseshoe crabs tend to stay on the same beaches or nearby beaches within the same season, and then they move to different beaches between seasons. So normally this time of year, we would be out on the beaches with volunteers tagging. So we tag around 4,000 horseshoe crabs a season, making us the largest tagging program in the United States with the help of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But right now we're not able to do that. There you go. But so yeah, so what we've learned so far is that they do tend to stay on our restored beaches. Okay. All right, so if you do ever find horseshoe crabs flipped upside down on the beach like this, you do want to flip them back over so that way their gills don't dry out. So you can simply turn them over that way. You can pick them up and return them to the water, which is what I'm going to do with these guys. All right, so high tide this morning was around 10:25, so she's already been up to lay her eggs. So she just makes a shallow depression in the sand to lay her eggs, and she'll be on her way out in a second. So they come up every high tide during the day and at night. We're at the beginning of horseshoe crab season right now. So we usually don't hit our peak until closer to Memorial Day. Horseshoe crabs prefer water temperatures around 54, 55 degrees. And it got a little cold last week, so the water temperature dropped. We have some other horseshoe crabs hanging around right now. So there's one there with a ton of barnacles on top. And we have another one over here. Yeah, so towards the later of the month, we'll start to see a lot more horseshoe crabs on our beaches. So thanks for joining me today at Reed's Beach. I hope you guys learned something about horseshoe crabs. I want to thank our funders, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, for making our beach restoration and our tagging work possible. Also to our partners, Stockton Coastal Research Center and Wildlife Restoration Partnerships and New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife as well. And to all of our volunteers who come out and tag with us every year. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.